Hello, my name is David Adès. I'm a poet based in Sydney and the host of this monthly poetry podcast reading series called Poets Corner in association with WestWords in Parramatta in Sydney's West. WestWords is Western Sydney's literature development organisation. Poets Corner is part of WestWords' public programming that celebrates the richness, diversity and insight that literature offers. Especially in these times, we thank the ongoing support of Create New South Wales, the Cultural Fund of Copyright Australia, City of Parramatta Council, Blacktown City Council and Campbelltown City Council, as well as the many project partners that have enabled us to continue to provide opportunities to writers and audiences. We hope that this new world will see us sharing and a closeness of spirit. Seems a bit far away at the moment, but we hope for it nonetheless. Each month, I invite a poet to read poems and talk about them around a theme of the poet's choice. Our guest poet today, all the way from North Carolina, is Kevin Hart, who will be reading poems from and talking with me on the theme of desire. But first, an acknowledgement of country. I'm recording this from Beecroft in Sydney. Kevin is recording from Durham in North Carolina in the United States. I'd like to pay my respects to and acknowledge the elders, past, present, and emerging, of the Wallamita people, the traditional custodians of the land in Beecroft, and to acknowledge also that they are the sovereign owners of their land, which has never been ceded or given up. I also pay my respects to and acknowledge the Eno people, traditional owners of the land from which Kevin is recording. Kevin Hart is the Joe Ray Wright University Distinguished Professor in the School of Divinity at Duke University, where he also teaches in the Department of English. His most recent books, among many, include Lands of Likeness for a Poetics of Contemplation, Chicago University Press, 2023, Dark Land, Memoir of a Secret Childhood, Paul Dry Books, 2024, and Contemplation, The Movements of the Soul, Columbia University Press, 2024. His Kierkegaard and Phenomenology is forthcoming from Cambridge University Press. Kevin's poems are gathered in Wild Track, New and Selected Poems, Notre Dame University Press 2015, and Barefoot, Notre Dame University Press 2018. A new collection, Carnets, is due out with Whips and Stock later this year. Another new collection, Firefly, is due out with Pitt Street Poetry also later this year. Kevin's collection, Carnet Bone, has recently been completed, and he is working on another, Jukebox. That's about a lifetime of collections in a couple of years, Kevin. Hi, Kevin, and welcome to Poets Corner.
David, thank you. It's a pleasure to be chatting with you.
You've chosen desire as your theme. It's a universal theme in a way. We're all susceptible to it. But the more I have thought about that, the more broadly I've interpreted the word desire, I suppose, the concept desire as encompassing all kinds of things, not just desire in terms of intimacy and eros, but how desire permeates into all aspects of our lives. The desire for validation, acceptance, inclusion, success, wealth, fame, power, and you can go on and on. So I want to start by asking you, in terms of your theme today and your poetics, what exactly you mean by desire? What are you including in that theme, and perhaps what are you excluding from it?
Sure, it's a very good question. I think of desire as an affirmation that there's something or someone in the world who says yes, and that I or anyone really, we say yes to that yes. And that is the coming together of a desire, the fulfillment of a desire. But of course, desire can often be met with a no as well, and thus emerges so much of the sorrow of the world.
When you suggested desire as a theme, you wrote, it's probably broad enough to cover a fair bit of what I do.
Yes.
And I know that your poetry covers a broad range of themes. A close friend of mine was very much hoping you would explore with me your poems on grief, for example.
Right.
So I thought I would ask, what is it about desire that you feel covers a fair bit of what you do and provides a good representation of your poetry?
Okay. Well, your friend is right. I could have spoken just as readily, maybe better, on the theme of grief, that particularly after my father died, I wrote a large number of poems that are grieving his loss. Um, and I've on other podcasts, I've talked a little bit about that. And I've also talked about the theme of religious desire that goes through my work as well. But it struck me that I hadn't spoken in quite a while about erotic desire. And that is something that goes all the way through, from the very beginning, all the way through to present poems. And I didn't want that theme to be lost. So I certainly had that as a focus. But as you say, it's like pulling a thread out of silk and everything gathers up around it.
I regard desire as a fluid and changeable thing. That what we desire as we age is very different from what we desire in our youth. Can you say something about how your engagement with the theme of desire in your poetry has evolved over your writing life?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it probably hasn't evolved all that much. I find that I desire a lot of the same things now that I did when I was a teenager. Um, I suppose circumstances change, though. As one ages, one desires to have more life, one desires to have healthy life, not just an intensity of life. Um, my wife is a lot younger than I am, and I've noticed that the desires since we've been married is to live longer and to be healthy, simply so I can spend more time with her and our son.
Hmm. It's interesting. It's an interesting thing because I feel as though uh, it changes quite a lot. Um, like the substrata perhaps is still what it always was, and the intensity might change, but I think, like you say, the focus is on things like health. Um, I feel like I desire things like clarity and things
Ah.
like I desire things that I perhaps, the confusion of youth has permeated too long for me. So
Uh, uh, I think I desired clarity when I was young as well. That's the thing. I started out doing mathematics and philosophy as well as writing poems. And so there's a lot in my mind that was, on the one hand, linked to clarity, and on the other hand, was linked to mystery, the mystery of poetry, the mystery of life, the mystery of God, and all of that. And I've spent a good deal of my life trying to toggle back and forth between clarity and mystery. And the same
mm,
is true in the poems, I'm sure.
well, poetry is very much a vehicle for that kind of
Right.
wrestling, isn't it?
It is.
Uh, this question, you might have already answered it, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you feel that you have now explored the theme of desire fully in your work, or is it an ongoing project?
I mean, every new poem is an adventure. And you sit down, and if a poem starts to be written, you don't know where it's going to go. It's a wild ride. And I'm always surprised at what happens. And I'm surprised about the revelation that it makes of myself, of some facet of myself that I haven't brought to clarity in my own mind. And so um, I would never forestall what could happen in the writing of a poem. The very writing of poetry is, of course, to do with desire. It's the desire for experience, not necessarily experience in the world, but a kind of compressed experience that comes only in the writing of a poem. And so that's something I'm sure why we always write more than one poem, because we want that experience of experience a lot more often. And that's all to do with the structure of desire.
It's a desire for reaching out and connecting too, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is because we're using language. And if you're trying to write well, you're trying to make something an effective communication. And over the years, it's surprising, you get emails every so often and letters saying that someone has connected very strongly with one particular poem or a book. And these are from people in countries maybe you've never been, people you'll never meet. And it's really wonderful that the poem manages to leap over horizons that you as a human being can't yourself.
Mm. Um, You're going to start your reading today with a couple of poems from a sequence titled 19 Songs.
Yes.
And later you'll be reading poems from other poem sequences. Before we turn to the individual poems, did you want to say something about what you're trying to explore poetically through grouping poems and sequences like you have?
Yeah, I suppose there's quite a number of sequences that I've written. Um, and the thing is, I never set out to write a sequence or anything like that. I set out to write a poem. Even that seems too strong a statement. I sit down at my desk or I take out my notebook that I carry around and scribble in it, and then something comes. But sometimes the energy goes on over days and weeks, and the poem itself leaps around and finds different forms. It goes to places I hadn't imagined, to voices I hadn't imagined in my head, and so a whole sequence gets written. And sometimes that takes years. So it's always a surprise.
Is the poem sequence in your mind one poem, or is it a number of poems that you put together in a sequence?
Yeah, I think if there weren't a unity, I wouldn't put them together. So there's got to be some kind of gathering going on, some kind of unifying impulse that goes through it. Um, and that's a bit of a problem when it comes to reading like this, because I'm just taking something out of context, and also when it comes to things being anthologized, that there's problems there. Everything
Yeah,
requires its context.
because you have a title for the sequence, but you don't have titles for the individual poems in it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, this was just this. The ones we're starting off with are from 19 songs, which I wrote quite a number of years ago when I was still living in Melbourne.
Hmm. All right. Well, shall we start with a poem?
Yeah, let's start with that. Okay, this is from 19 songs. I only want to lay my head upon your lap and let my hands meet round your waist. I only want to rest and hear you talk a while and breathe the perfume of your words. Men simply look at you and fall in love again. I only want the world to turn a little faster now, so they fall off the globe and a great turtle eats them up. I only want to live forever in your kiss and let my hands slip down your thighs. I only want your eyes and breasts to say my name and your light hand undo my belt.
So you begin this poem with the words, I only want,
Yes.
which are repeated 5 times in 12 lines.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I'm really interested in the choice of words here. The term I only want rather than I want.
Right.
The use and the repetition of the word only suggests both that the narrator doesn't want that much really, but it also suggests to me that the narrator is trying to understate what he wants and that he actually wants more, as becomes evident from the words that follow. For example, I only want to live forever in your kiss.
Yes.
Quite a large want, that one. Can you comment on that terminology and what you intended by it?
Right. You're very acute. The only want sounds such a modest requirement. I only want to lay my head upon your lap. Well, that's perfectly reasonable in certain circumstances. Um, and it goes on, particularly when the element of mediated desire comes up. Men simply look at you and fall in love again. And then I say, the speaker says, I only want the world to turn a little faster now, so they fall off the globe and a great turtle eats them up. So, there's an element of humor come in, but the
Yes.
humor is there to make a point about the desire for the relationship with the woman. And then, of course, it becomes quite extravagant. I only want to live forever in your kiss. But finally, at the end, the speaker um, invites the girl to do the action.
Yes, indeed. I mean, in terms of desire, there is carnal desire here,
Yeah,
but there is much more than that. There is an impossible desire, it seems to me, for unity, for
right.
for for the dissolution of boundaries, and for timelessness. Do I have that right? Is the poem
I
trying to pick the limits of desire?
I think you're right. I mean, this is one of the problems, one of the agonies of desire, that you always desire too much and not enough. How can you possibly ever desire that which is exactly right for you and the other person? And the poem plays with that business of overshooting limits and even falling short of them. I only want this. I'm only asking a very small thing.
Um, there is a romanticism and almost idealism in the poem that speaks to me of a young person's desire for oneness and love. Um, and you said that, the desire for you has not changed over time so much. But I think it's fair to say that you're no longer in the first blush of youth, Kevin. Is
No, I'm just allowed to vote now.
it is this poem trying to recall or recapture or invoke an earlier state of being? Or is it saying that this romanticism and idealism can persist well beyond youth?
Okay, this was that particular poem was written about half my lifetime ago. So, um, so things might have been a little different then.
Interesting that you're choosing to read it now.
Oh, I've read it many times at readings.
So it's something that's sort of timeless for you.
Yeah, there was something in that sequence which was very erotic and seemed very honest, and also there was a kind of simplicity to it that I really liked, that I was very pleased to have achieved at that time. One of the
Mm,
hardest things I think one can do in poetry is to write simply without being reductive.
mm,
That's what I was hoping to do.
mm. I found the repetition in the poem kind of hypnotic,
Yeah.
as, as if the narrator is under desire's spell. Do you conceive of desire as something hypnotic or as something perhaps overwhelming reason and perhaps rationality?
Oh, I think desire, particularly sexual desire, is not just hypnotic. It exerts enormous fascination, and you can't release yourself from its grip. Um, you are held tight by it, and you can't move an inch away from it once you're possessed by it.
You don't really want to remove yourself from its grip, though, do you?
If it's going well, no.
All right. Would you like to read another one from that
Yes,
sequence?
this is from that same sequence. Um, I think that hardly anyone has ever fallen very far. There are so many safety nets. There are so many nooses tied. For when you truly fall in love, each glass of wine is tasted twice, because each sip is for her too, because each sip means twice as much. I think that hardly anyone has ever fallen very far. So many men walk round and round, so many men just will not jump. For when you truly fall in love, the sun comes closer by a mile. It is enough to make you sweat. It is enough to make you strip.
I found it an intriguing proposition that hardly anyone has ever fallen very far. I would have thought I would have thought that there was plenty of evidence that people fall into obsession or madness or possessiveness or control or a range of other states that suggest very deep falls. What is the poem trying to say by suggesting otherwise?
I think our society, um, when I read the poem, and maybe even more now, is just full of protocols and norms and limits and discourse of being sensible and being prudent and of not expecting too much and of not going too far. And I've noticed with younger people, um, I'm a teacher, so I see this all the time, that they will take minute steps in relationships. They won't immediately jump in. They don't want to be hurt, and they want to have safety nets, and they want to have ways of getting out of a relationship if it goes sour. So that's the kind of thing I had in mind.
Yeah, were you like that when you were young?
In terms of jumping, yeah, I was
Yeah.
a jumper. I jumped from great heights, sometimes falling on my face, other times landing more softly.
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting that, you would see it as a kind of generalization because I'm sure there's tons of jumpers out there, tons of risk takers, tons of people willing to be vulnerable.
Well, you live in Sydney, you probably see more of that than I do.
I don't know.
No one jumped in Melbourne when I was living in Melbourne.
There you go. Interesting. The term falling in love
Hmm.
been around since the 16th century. I looked into this and stems from allowing vulnerability and risk sometimes quite suddenly,
Yes,
and with that, a lessening of control.
that's right.
But this poem posits, nah, not really, because there are so many safety nets. There are
Yeah.
so many applied. You've alluded to this, but what safety nets specifically in nooses is it referring to?
Well, the safety net, obviously, which was just going to catch you in case you do jump and you make a complete fool of yourself. But also, the noose is tied like you're jumping off and committing suicide. And so people often think it's a kind of suicidal leap. I'll kill myself if I leap. And of course, when people hang themselves, when men hang themselves, they get erections. So that's partly in play as well. So there are reasons not to jump, that you might kill yourself, and also that you might simply just fall a few inches and be caught.
Mm. The first couple of stanzas of the poem could refer to either gender, but
Yeah,
then there's a pivot to men.
yep.
What are you saying about men in the lines? So many men walk around and around, so many men just will not jump. Why men and not women, for example?
Well, I tell you what, I grew up, I read a memoir about this a couple of years ago. I grew up with my mother as a dressmaker, and my company when I was a little boy growing up was entirely women coming to my mother's for their dresses, being measured, being fitted, picking up the dresses, and so forth. And so my evenings until I was pubescent were completely taken up listening to young girls talk. And what they were talking about is their boyfriends mostly, and about the problems with their boyfriends. And it was one long litany of complaint. Um, so I think I probably grew up with the idea about the men walking round and round, like the girls would be saying, when's he going to ask me out then, really? I mean, when's he going to take me round to meet his parents? Is he really intense? Does he want to marry me? So all of these things kept circling through my childhood. And I'm sure they had some kind of effect upon how I view men.
Yeah, it does remind me of in my early 20s going out to uh well, what we used to call them discos. They weren't discos really, but the old pubs with bands and music and whatever. And all the girls would be on the dance floor and all the boys would be around the bar drinking.
Oh, it's exactly right.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed. That's how it was when I was a boy. And,
Oh,
and,
years ago now for me as well.
yeah, yeah, it was always like that. Yeah.
Um, is the last line of the poem, "It is enough to make you strip," meant to be both literal and metaphorical, referring not just to clothes, but stripping oneself of defenses, of allowing vulnerability?
Yeah, my hat is off to you again. You're a very perceptive reader. It's to take off one's clothes, obviously, make love, but also to strip off those defenses, precisely.
Mm.
Yeah, to risk oneself with the other person.
All right. Your next poem is from another sequence called Little Songbook.
Yeah. Okay. Let me read this. We love those liquid August days so much. They cling like cotton shirts all limp with sweat. September comes, and then we miss their touch. We miss the fleshy thunderstorm's vague threat. Thin girls who taste of Beaujolais at night. They cling like cotton shirts all limp with sweat, though morning sees them gone, as well it might. Summer restrings our days and plays them slow, with girls who taste of Beaujolais at night, who whisper thickly that they love you so, like blues sung soft and sweet out in the dark. Summer restrings our days and plays them slow on yellow afternoons lost in a park. I knew a girl whose very smile was wine, was blues sung soft and sweet out in the dark. She left one day without a single line. We love those liquid August days so much. They give us girls whose very smiles are wine. September comes, and then we miss their touch.
So this poem's a villanelle, and I
No, it's not a villanelle. It's
villanelle.
it's a
It follows,
variation on a villanelle.
it follows the form of a villanelle pretty closely.
It follows it pretty closely, but it varies it. Yeah,
But what I'm saying, well, what I'm trying to say is that you've got the musicality that you get from a villanelle.
absolutely, absolutely. The villanelle is a very difficult form. I've only actually written one of them that I wanted to preserve. And I think it's one of those things where you've just got to wait to be struck by lightning because it's very hard to get the lines that will bear all the repetition. This one is a variation on it um, that I came across in a book of poetics. And I kept in mind for many years that I wanted to try to write it. And then one day it just simply became possible. You just have to have those lines that will bear the repetition.
So what's the variation?
I can't remember now. This is so long ago I wrote it. Um,
Hmm,
but it has a it's slightly longer, I think, than a villanelle.
right. Um, Talking about that form,
Yep,
it began as an Italian and Spanish dance songs.
that's right.
Uh,
Yeah,
Speaking of simple, often pastoral and rustic themes, although it's evolved over the centuries, and there probably are quite a few variations now. It seems the perfect form for this kind of poem.
right.
Um, can you say something about form in your poetry generally, and in relation to this poem, whether the poem chose the form or the form chose the poem?
Yes, this is like the chicken and the egg, isn't it? Um, it's funny. I can recall exactly what happened. That I was reading through a book of poetics and came across this variation of the villanelle, which I'd never heard of, and I made a note of it. And I looked up what examples there were in English, and there were only a couple, and I didn't particularly like them. So I filed this away as something I would like to try one day. Um, and then I remember I wrote the opening line. We love those liquid August days so much. And I thought, this has got the potential to be written in that particular form. So I tried it out. Now, I should say, this doesn't always happen. It doesn't always happen successfully. I've tried this with other poems and just had to abandon them. Sometimes, though, in trying to fulfill the strict requirements of a form like a villanelle or a sonnet or a sestina, one of those things, you can generate lines that you wouldn't normally have written.
Yeah.
And then they can be folded back into other poems that you might write. The lines just go into your notebook and become available for other poems. They might well generate another and much better poem.
Mm. But I've heard it said that form is both a constraint and a liberation.
Yeah, I think that's true. Um, John Ashbery used to say that it's like riding a bicycle downhill where the pedals push your feet.
um, and form generally in your work, do you use form a lot?
Yeah, there's probably quite a number of poems. I've never added them up in quite strict forms if I looked over the whole of my work. And there's a number of poems where I try forms myself, which might be hidden. For example, I can give you an example. When I was fairly young, I wrote a poem called Prague 1968, about the terrible events in Czechoslovakia. And I remember I wrote it in alternate lines of 9 syllables and 11 syllables. So it was always just falling short of iambic pentameter and just exceeding
Mm.
iambic pentameter. And it gave the lines a certain frisson that wouldn't have worked in iambic pentameter. There was something slightly uneasy about them, which fitted the mood of the poem. So there are poems like that where I've used syllabics to a certain extent. Um, also, different arrangements of lines with different numbers of feet in each line, which aren't in any set form at all. And of course, there's other poems which are following musical forms.
Sonal sort of structures.
Tonal, exactly, yes. Well, they're ones that just come completely out of the blue.
Mm. Um, this poem doesn't reveal where it's located, though the reference to Beaujolais suggests France.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm not sure why, but to me it has a European flavour.
Huh?
It can't be Australia because liquid orchis days here are just usually rainy. Um,
Right.
I know the poem should show, not tell. So was your intention to leave the location unstated so that readers could place it wherever they felt it worked best?
You know, it's not the place is not heavily marked in the poem, but I was thinking of more or less where I live, namely in the American South. I'm a
Mm.
great fan of the blues, and one of the wonderful things about living in Virginia or now in North Carolina is that you have the blues all around you. There are nightclubs that have the blues. You can always get wonderful recordings of the blues. It's just all around in the culture. And so the blues, which has played a much bigger role in my poetry since moving to the United States than when I was in Australia, that the blues certainly marks the poem. It might specify it as being in the South.
Mm. Okay. Um, I noticed that the first four stanzas are written in the present tense,
Yep,
and then the last two stanzas, the poem pivots to the past tense,
yep.
um, which to me gave the poem a present day gaze upon the past. Um, what was your purpose in doing this? Was it to infuse the present with a sense of yearning and nostalgia, or did you have other ideas in mind?
Well, it's to modify that strong sense of assurance of we love those liquid August days so much that there's pain involved in erotic relationships as well. Um, the relationship breaks down, the person leaves, and you're left not with summer, but you're left with the start of fall and the kind of sadness that that brings.
Which segues into my next question, which is the reference in the poem to absence. She left one day without a single line.
Yeah.
Uh, what do you think the role of absence is in desire?
Without desire, without absence, there's no desire. What is it Yeats said? It is terrible to love and not possess. It is terrible to possess and not to love. I think that's in his autobiographies. And it puts it very crisply that there's what we value, what we need is the interval of desire, that you can't completely englobe another person in your own being, that there must be some play between the two of you, the right sort of distance and the right kind of intimacy. Um, in a relationship where that works, the relationship works. And when it doesn't work, it's all over.
Hmm. Well, it's a good segue into uh, your next poem, which is uh, in part about sorrow.
Ah, yes. Okay. Now we were just talking about the blues. So this actually is a kind of blues of a certain literary sort. Okay. So sorrow bums his way right into town. So sorrow comes our way with rusty crown. It's down, oh down, my dear. It's always down. He's got our faces fixed in his blank look. He's got our names clean written in his book. He's got our queen, our knight. He's got our rook. You said you loved me, and you told a lie. But girlfriend, on each wall there hangs a fly. It made me hurt, dear heart. It made me cry. But tears won't warm my bed at night, old love. I've had it plenty, girl. I've had enough. What's past is dead and won't bear thinking of. And I don't care if we must call it quits. At least I'll nail some sense into my wits. But how you lied, sweet girl, shook me to bits.
You're probably going to correct me on my assessment of the form again, but feel free. This poem has 5 3-line stanzas or tercets.
Yeah,
Most typically, tercets in this form have every first and third line ending in a rhyme. Here you have all 3 lines rhyming. Did
right.
you have specific objective in doing that?
Well, I was trying to follow certain movements in the blues, but of course to make them much more lyrical than you actually do get in blues lyrics, which wouldn't stand up as poetry without a wonderful voice and terrific music. So this is trying to make it as memorable as the blues are, but so using rhyme and meter much more solidly so than one would in a lyric that would be sung.
Mm. I'm interested in the tone of the poem, Kevin.
Yeah,
Begins with references to sorrow, which is usually, in my experience, a rueful or maudlin matter.
yeah,
But the tone is light, almost whimsical,
yeah,
and there's no bitterness. The narrator still fondly refers to the object of his addresses, girlfriend, old love, dear heart, sweet girl,
yeah.
to be a disjunct between the subject of the poem and its tone. What were you trying to do by writing the poem in that way?
Okay. I mean, what is the blues about? The blues is always about loss. The You can't write a blues which is happy. It's always about things getting worse. I woke up today, it was raining. Woke up today, my girl had gone. You know, every blues that I listen to has got that kind of structure to it. So in this one, while I wanted to acknowledge that sense of sadness, um, I also wanted an element in it of playfulness. So the game of chess, for example, he's got our names clean written in his book. He's got our queen, our knight. He's got our rook. So it's not just the girl and the boy who are having this trouble. There is this third agent, sorrow, who's just come into town and is wrecking them.
And the whimsy works for that.
I think so. Yeah. Um, it's the tone is a little more relaxed than you might get in the blues.
Mm.
Blues, you can't write a blues in poetry that it would just seem completely implausibly miserable. So there has to be a slight lightening of the tone, I think, if you're writing it as a poem.
The question this poem asks
Hmm.
is, what do you do with desire when it is thwarted? Yeah. And the answer seems to be to put desire to bed, so to speak, to let it go.
Yeah,
Lust is dead and won't bear thinking of.
that's right.
So that is exactly what the narrator is doing. He's thinking of it.
Ah,
So
the paradox of desire. Yes, this is one of the things that makes desire so interesting. You say, well, that's it. I'm putting in the past that was experienced. I'm done. I'm out of here. However,
I'm writing poems about it.
I'm writing poems about it. It hasn't gone away.
So, the poem's message is that desire is not that easily switched off, is it?
No,
That even if I've had it plenty, girl, I've had enough, desire continues to haunt and torment.
right. There's a story I was told some years ago about some novices in the Catholic Church who are going to become priests, with a very old, distinguished priest in their midst. And one of the novices said, Father, when do you come to terms with the woman question? And the old priest, who was well into his late 80s or early 90s, leaned back and reflected, and he said, I'd say half an hour after death.
If then.
If
Uh,
then. Yeah.
yeah. The narrator in this poem is fixated on the lie and
Yeah.
how the lie impacted on him.
Right.
Seems to me that that fixation treats love as a static thing and doesn't acknowledge that the supposed lie could have been truth when it was uttered, but that thing subsequently changed. And fixating on the lie kind of absolves the narrator from any responsibility in what occurred. Is that
Oh,
part of what I convey in this poem? Am I reading too much into it?
I mean, certainly the narrator wants to think of it as he's been told a lie. Whether he has been told a lie, whether he had any part in the breakup, if so, he's occluding that.
Yes.
But we don't know. We don't know. I mean, lyric poems are just instances. They're structures of emotion. They don't tell much of a story. They tell enough of a story to get us involved, but they won't tell us actually exactly what happened, what started, and they sometimes won't say how it ends.
No, well, the idea of a poem is to pose questions, not to provide answers.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. But you see, I'm here and I'm interrogating you on your poetry, so I'm asking questions.
Oh no, no, you're fine. They're open to examination.
Yeah. All right. Now you've got one from another sequence called Sugar.
Oh yes, I mean all of these. Oh my goodness. Um, this has just all come out printed very strange. Let me try to read it, even though it's come out very oddly. Ask me about the sugar cane that burns on summer evenings just south of Innisfail, how its immense perfume enters the deepest mansion of the soul. You don't need wine, my friend. You don't need rum. And ask about the sugar ants swarming beneath the sheets up there, burnt orange on your legs, black heads that stare you down while quickly sucking on your sweaty hairs. You'll need a drink, my friend. You'll need some rum. But never ask about her kiss that tastes like naked sugar juice, or how, one harvest night, she slipped her panties warm beneath my head so I might have sweet dreams. I don't need wine, my friend. I don't need rum.
There you go. You read it very well, despite the printing problems.
It's come out as a complete shambles.
Um, Innisfail, for those who don't know, is in sort of northern Queensland coastal
Yeah.
area. I take it that it's in the middle of sugarcane country. I
Yep.
take it you were there, Kevin, at some stage. What were you doing there?
No, I wasn't. I would love to have gone to North Queensland, but I never got further than about Bundaberg.
Right.
So
So,
no, that's something I'd like to do one of these days. I've got a very dear old friend, my oldest friend in the world, who lives in Cairns, and one day I'm hoping to visit him and see that part of the world. But I was growing up for years in Brisbane, and so North Queensland was like something you dreamt about. It was always preying on my imagination. And Innisfail had the largest rainfall in Australia. I remember as a kid learning that fact. And there was something about the sugarcane fields and the heat and the drinking up there that always leaned on my imagination and came out when I was writing this poem.
hmm. So how much of your poetry is born from experience and how much of it is imagined?
It's probably six of one, half a dozen of the other. I mean, I'm writing a sequel to my memoir, Darkland, at the moment called The Yellow Brick Road. And I've just finished the chapter on growing up in Brisbane and being in high school in Brisbane. And just writing that reminds me of how formative all of the smells and sights of Brisbane were to my imagination. And I end that chapter by saying there's certain things that as soon as I think of them, the images are always of buildings or places in Brisbane. They've always been the model of things that I thereafter have imagined.
Mm. Well, it's actually making me think. I wasn't planning to ask this question, but I will. You must have been writing poetry from a very young age because it seems like you've been writing forever. What led you there?
Yeah, I've been around for a little while. I started writing poems when I was 13. Um, I talk about this in my memoir, Darkland. Uh, in England, where I was born, I was at the bottom of the class. They tried to take me out of school when I was 9 or 10 because they couldn't teach me anything. But that didn't work. The local butcher wouldn't take me on as an apprentice, so I had to go back to school. And then my parents migrated to Brisbane, and I still remained solidly at the bottom of the class. Nothing happened. But Australia was a very different place from London, and there were so many wonderful things about it that I blossomed there. And when I was 13, I had a very strange experience and went from being the dumbest kid in the class to being good at everything. So everything changed for me at that point. And it occurred at the onset of puberty. It occurred with a sense of delight in everything that I was smelling and tasting and seeing in Queensland. And that really lit my imagination.
Hmm. Um, I'm going back to the poem now.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm going to do the obvious thing and take up the poem's invitation and ask you about the sugarcane and the sugar ants.
Right.
First, tell me about the immense perfume of burnt sugar and just how it enters the deepest mansion of the soul.
Okay. I don't know if you've ever smelt sugarcane being burnt. Is this extraordinary, rich, dark smell. And it's as though it goes right down into the center of your being. The notion of the mansions of the soul I took from Teresa of Avila, where she has this extraordinary book where she says about how we move inwards through mansions of the soul until we get to the deepest one where Christ is seated on a throne. And I imagined rather here that it's the perfume of the sugar which goes all the way into one's deepest being. But of course, it's the sugar on fire. It's not sugar one's going to eat, it's sugar which is lost.
Mm. And tell me about the sugar ants and why you need a drink when the sugar ants swarm beneath the sheets.
Well, from what I've heard of friends of mine who've been up there, um, the ants are just terrible. And if you get these ants in your bed, you'll be bitten all night. And you get out of bed and you drink something coming out of the sugar, rum. Now, rum is a drink I can't bear, so there's no autobiographical element whatsoever in this. I would never drink rum. I've tasted it once and it was horrible. So this is completely at the antipodes of that autobiography. But it says when this bad thing happens to you, you're being eaten alive in your bed, for goodness sakes, by these ants, that you want to get out of bed and have a drink.
I was wondering whether there's any medicinal properties, but okay.
No, no,
Uh,
no, not to my knowledge.
okay. I'm tempted to ignore the admonition, and ask about the kiss, but I'll resist the temptation. I want to ask you, though, about what the poem is saying about the heady rush, the intoxication of desire that renders other forms of intoxication redundant.
Yeah. Again, you put your finger exactly on what's happening there. The highly erotic image there of the girl who puts her panties under the man's head so that he may have sweet dreams is I don't know what to say about it, apart from the fact that you don't, given all of that, that intoxication, that erotic intoxication, there's no alcohol which is going to come close to it. I mean, that's what Homer calls the cream of life. It doesn't get better than that.
um, I mentioned that this poem was part of a sequence called Sugar.
Yeah.
Can you say something about that sequence and perhaps where this poem sits within that sequence?
it comes towards the end, and um, the sequence came as a complete surprise. I certainly didn't have any schemata of sugar. It was just I wrote the first part of it, and then another part came. The imagination is a strange thing. The human mind is a very strange thing. It seems to play around like a kind of game of hide and go seek with you. And there were, as it were, parts of the poem that were playing hide and seek, and I just had to wait for them to come. And then after a while, after the 9 or 10 poems in it, the game just stops, and there's nothing you can do to get another one. Just impossible. But while it's going on, your mind is doing something that it doesn't normally do, or at least as I experience it. It's playing at a very deep level and is being very open and receptive to everything. It's as though one's entire consciousness, in this case, was eroticized.
Is it consciousness or subconsciousness? I mean,
Yeah,
waking up one day and suddenly there's another sort of germ of a poem in the
yeah,
sequence?
yeah. That's exactly the sort of thing that happens. I think it's on that borderline between the unconscious and the conscious. Um, and every poet, I'm sure, will testify at some stage to the importance of being able to maintain that relationship. I mean, you can't rely wholly on the unconscious. My dear friend, long past now, Vincent Buckley, told me one day that he had this idea that it was the unconscious that gave you all the great images for poetry, and that he wanted to mine these. So he decided to keep a little notebook by his bedside, and he'd write down images when he woke up in the night. And so one night this happened, and he wrote in his notebook what he thought was a great line. And then in the morning, he remembered it, looked it up, and what he had written was, "Bananas are delicious." So it was useless. It was completely useless. That's the unconscious, which is very slow. The surrealists invested a huge amount in the notion of the unconscious, but I suspect that poets do better when we look at that divided and equivocal area between the unconscious and the conscious, often just as we're waking or just as we're falling asleep.
Yeah, that's wonderful. All right. Have you got another poem for us?
Yeah, there's a couple more here. Okay, this one is quite hard to read. It's a poem called Gillyflower, Gillyflower, and it's about one of my favorite blues songs uh, called Spoonful, played by Cream, by Howling Wolf in the most wonderful version. And it's about listening to this some band playing it in Commonwealth Park in Canberra in summer of 1976, which was when I was in my last year of college. And it's got no punctuation because there's a lot of play between the different words. So I have to take a deep breath to start this. I wanted love to touch you that warm day. Molten guitars were playing in the fire of a late afternoon that pinked my flesh. Your arm, blonde little hairs upon your arm. Isn't it pretty, you said, and looked away. A dragonfly from fingertip to wrist was clinging to a single blade near where you threw your bag. It held the diamond world inside its eyes, then flew off backwards. Oh, it's pretty, said my smile. Oceans of air above us as we lay in that rich grass. Galahs high up in branches looking down. So much I wanted, God, so much that day. White gillyflower going to my head. Please don't release me from this flesh too soon. This melting afternoon, this singing light. I wanted love to touch you there, your arm, but then you moved away to wear some shade. Come back, dear time. I only looked aside. Pass me the spoon again. But you had turned to watch pink birds fly off toward the lake. A moment stinging worse with every year, with grief nests, one, two, three, across my world. Always that song, your words beneath its chords. God looking down on me perhaps that day, able to see it all. Guitars in heat, white gillies, time, birds flying out of sight.
When did you write this poem, Kevin?
Okay, I wrote this poem when I was living in Charlottesville, maybe about 12, 13 years ago.
Okay, so many, many years after the event.
Many years after. Yeah, many years after.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for introducing to me the word gillyflower. I'd never heard of it before.
Ah,
Uh,
it
so
was used in Canberra when I was living there.
yeah, it refers to carnations apparently, primarily. Um, so the location of the poem is in Commonwealth Park in Canberra. The
Yep,
time is 76. You've just
yep,
said you're a young man, your early 20s.
yep.
Someone in Commonwealth Park is playing the blues song Spoonful.
Yes.
Is the poem written so long afterwards attempting to describe or capture a moment in the amber of poetry?
It's trying to capture a moment in the amber of poetry. It's a nice expression. It's about the loss of a particular moment, um, when the boy could have said something to the girl and missed the moment. And if you know the song Spoonful, you know the lyrics of
I don't
Spoonful.
know.
It's actually about cocaine.
Right.
It's been sung so often that sometimes the reference to cocaine isn't there, and it's about a spoonful of sugar. It's about a spoonful of coffee. It's about a spoonful of love.
Mm.
And the poem is about the boy wanting all of that again. The chance has gone by, it's just been missed, and it can't come back. But all the way through the poem, um, there's ambiguities, as is always the case in these kinds of events. So, I wanted love. I wanted love to touch you that warm day. So the punctuation isn't there, so it can be read in different ways. And then, of course, God comes in. I wanted so much, I wanted God so much that day, but
Mm.
also so much I wanted God so much that day. There's a different valence of the word God that occurs. And all the way through the poem, it plays out with a whole sphere of different meanings that one might have in that particular sense of that particular sense of the occasion.
Mm. Um, the time in life that this refers to, a young man's life,
Yeah.
the time when, in my experience anyway, we are prone to fling our hearts all over the place in a kind
Yes.
of wild hope.
Yes.
Uh, when we fantasize about possibilities and love, but where often our desire for love is not reciprocated and our love or potential love is unrequited.
That's right.
Is this poem a kind of homage to that young adult sensibility?
It certainly is, and it's a kind of poem of lament of the boy was so stupid as not to say anything. There was a moment, and he could have taken advantage of it, and he didn't, and he lost the girl. She goes off.
Yes, I've been in that moment a few times.
I think probably we all have. Alas, alas.
Um, there's a powerful bridge between a song and a moment,
Yeah,
where we're hearing a song again, despite the passage of many years, takes us right back to
right.
both to both the memory and the emotional resonance of you could call it a pivotal moment, and where that moment remains sharp and clear, or as you put it, a moment stinging worse with every year.
Yes,
And there is a kind of bittersweetness, isn't there, to such moments? They hurt, but we don't want to forget them. We want
right,
to return to them and how we felt at the time, don't we?
right, right. And here I am writing it, and and preserving it as certainly throughout my life. And so it's there for anyone to read as well, for as long as the poem survives. Um, it holds together that longing of the young man and also the pain that he experiences.
It's interesting though, because even if he'd said something, nothing is guaranteed.
No, no, you just hope.
It might have changed the outcome, but
No, no, it might have all gone sour anyway.
yeah. Can you say something about the line, "Come back, dear time, I only looked aside"? Is it saying that things happen so fast that they have passed before we have fully grasped them? Or
Yeah,
isn't it?
I mean, there they are, the boy and the girl are lying down next to one another in the grass. Whatever the girl's thinking, we don't know. And the boy doesn't really know either. He might have some ideas, but you never really know what's going on in the other person's head, what the other person is feeling. And then suddenly the cloud shifts and she's got the sunlight on her, and it's a hot Canberra summer day.
Mm.
And she's not stupid, she just moves to get some shade. And then the moment has passed. And the boy says, "Come back, dear time. I only looked aside. Just one moment. I looked
Yeah.
aside." And the time is dear time because the time has brought them together. And then he's fluffed it. And
Yes, but
it's gone forever.
because you've said that the poem was written in 1976 and it was about an event in 1976 and
Yeah,
you've written it so many years later, to
right.
me, "Come back, dear time" could also mean that 40, 50 years.
Oh, yes, definitely, without a doubt. I mean, I don't know what it would take to read the poem in the way that I imagined it to be read, where every ambiguity could be unfolded, and that would be one of them.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, One question this poem posits for me, Kevin, is, are we reconciled to such moments? Or do we still, after 50 years, think about what we could have done differently in them? Or what our lives might have been like if, for example, love did touch the object of the narrator's desire, and as Jorge Luis Borges put it, the garden of forked paths led your life elsewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things as you grow older, even if you're very content, as I am, you feel about what would have happened if things had gone slightly differently at so many moments when you were younger. And that for me was certainly one of them. That might have led me to an alternate life. I say in a one-line poem in my book Kane, um, that one's middle name slyly hints at an alternate life one might have lived. In my case, John. There's some person, John, out there in another possible world living my life differently. And it's extraordinary how many times that we have this opportunity to live differently, for better or worse. We don't know because we don't take that path, but we lament that we didn't take it. The moment stings, and that poem, I think, of all the poems I've written about that particular sort of experience, it captures that sense of stingingness the best.
Yes. I mean, somewhere in all those parallel universes, there are multiple us's doing all those other things. And
Right.
perhaps,
Well, except we don't meet them. It would be too much.
oh, it would. It certainly would. All right. Your next poem is Night Letters.
Yeah. Okay. This was written a few years after this other one. Um, okay. At night, I flick my lamp and write to her. Words live inside that circle, dance around, each crying, "Look at me, I look at you." After a paragraph, her face appears. After a page, I see her on the couch and feel her fingers interlaced with mine. Perhaps there is a word that equals love, that cores the self and leaves it ragged raw. Perhaps I'll find it waiting in the dark before my letter flies across the sea, like all the others that have gone her way. In truth, I never know if they arrive, if they must linger in some border town, be read by men in suits who want to know that word I riffle all of life to find, who see her conjured as they turn each page and fall in love themselves and breathe her name and say, he'll think she's gone on holiday, while one confines my letter in his coat. It crouches in the gloom, remembering the things I hadn't said when morning blinked. I'll write again and tell her everything, but so those men will quickly let it through. How I can taste September rain in fruit, how moonlight's walking naked in our room, how now I've proved the dogwood once again. The mailbox could be seen from every chair.
What struck me as a poet who, is familiar with this idea of wrestling with words,
Yeah,
uh, is the dichotomy in this poem between the power of words, which is such that, after a page, I see her on the couch and feel her fingers interlaced with mine.
right.
And at the same time, their utter inadequacy,
Yes,
which poets are always beating their heads against. The word I riffle all of life to find.
yes, yes.
Can you say something about that, both in the context of this poem and in the broader context of how you wrestle with poetry generally?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. In my experience, when a poem goes well, for me, this might be unusual. The first draft is written very, very quickly, in 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. And then it goes onto a page, and I go back to it and sometimes change words. Um, Less and less as I go on, because you learn a bit more. The craft goes into your bones and muscles a lot more. Uh, but sometimes there are words where it takes, I can think of one instance where it took 10 years for the right word to come. And it was a very simple word. I was just blind to it. But you have to trust to see that the word will actually come. And and here, I suppose one of the oddities is that, where is it? Yeah. Um, the poem is about trying to find a word which will encapsulate what the girl means to the boy. And that person is struggling with it. But the poem itself presents it. So it's all about a word that equals love, that cores the self and
Mm,
leaves it ragged raw.
mm,
So it's in that line that cores the self and leaves it ragged raw, where I think we get a sense of what that kind of erotic experience is, that sense of desire, that one's cored and emptied, but it is one's core which is taken out,
mm.
and that one's left raw, but not cleanly. It's ragged. One's been hurt. One's been changed and transformed by the experience. And one has to be completely open in that way for the love ever to take root.
And, you know, the word I riffle all of life to find,
Mm,
you
yeah.
never find.
Um, it's not just waiting there. How often is it that you think this is an experience I'm having? This is so important. This is pivotal, to use your word. Um, there must be some analog earlier in my life for this that I can refer to. Something I've undergone, something I've read, some conversation with a friend, and you're riffling as though trying to steal something to find a word that will work.
Mm. One of the things that we desire is reciprocity.
Yeah, yeah.
If our lover is physically distant and we write letters that are unanswered,
Hmm.
imaginations run riot with the ambiguity of silence. Is
Yes.
that what is happening here?
Oh, absolutely. It's what's conceived is that the letter goes and it's being censored by at some border, And the letter is so erotically charged that the people in the border read it, and one of them steals it because he might be able to make use of it himself in an erotic adventure. Uh, but so the author who's fantasizing all of this has to write another letter to the girl, this time capturing more of what's important in their relationship.
Yes, but I want to talk about that because yeah, the poem's written at night. Night
Yep.
thoughts often a slippery slope, filled with
Yep.
anxiety, a tendency to run away on dark frolics of their own and to catastrophize.
Yep.
In this case, the men in suits that you've mentioned intercepting the male. Is this poem in part about anxiety? And if so, did things look better in the morning?
Yeah. I mean, it's about anxiety. It's about fantasizing. But also, since you mentioned it in the morning, the man gets up and prunes all of the dogwood by the mailbox so he can actually see when the postman comes by delivering mail. So he can just rush to get the letter. So the result he has is of cutting back this beautiful thing, the dogwood tree, just so that he can see the letter coming from his girlfriend as soon as it arrives.
See, I interpreted that last line differently. To me,
Ah,
it kind of had a sinister sense. The mailbox can be seen from every chair. It could be seen as a haunting, an agony, a rebuke. Um,
oh, well, I will gladly admit the reading. Uh, I love the ambiguity there, but that was one I hadn't felt myself. But I can certainly see it there.
um, what are you referring to in the lines? And you spoke in the Gillyflower poem about the boy not having said what he should have said to the girl and missing the
Yeah,
opportunity. What are you referring to in the lines? Remembering the things I hadn't said, and I'll write again and tell her everything. Are these lines about a struggle for intimacy from a distance, a struggle to connect, or are they suggesting a need to confess something, or is it something else?
I think it's probably all of that. Um, he wrote the letter one morning, um, or he's remembering things he hadn't said when morning came. If he was writing it at night, it's ambiguous. And what do you say when you're in love? Because when you're in love, everything is supercharged with meaning. And the simplest thing has untold significance. So you're in love with someone, particularly in the first stages of love, and um, you're doing the washing up and you break a glass. And the fact that you fumbled and broken the glass is enormously significant. Or you eat something and it tastes different, and it tastes different because you're thinking of her. Um, so you can't say everything in the letter. It would take, it'd be like Middlemarch. It'd be a very long letter being sent. Um, so the boy thinks, I'll try again. And this time he's going to send it, though, in a coded way. So
Mm,
it's not as overt in its protestations of love how I can taste September rain in fruit, how moonlight's walking naked in our room. And so the people who are reading the letters in his fevered imagination won't steal the letter. They won't recognize all that's going on. It's coded to do with conversations the boy has had with the girl on other occasions.
mm. Wonderful. You've got one more for us, Kevin.
Yeah, one more. Okay, this is from a sequence in
No.
my book Firefly. It's right at the end, and it's a series called Flashes, which occur from history, from very ancient history through modern history, with me filtered through them all. And this is a poem called The Chateau, and it's about a town in France that I know, Montrézul, but it's set in 1864. So it's written by a young, it's spoken by a young man, an English young man who's there in the middle of the 19th century. That year I sojourned in La Loire again, in Montrezur, and gazed at the Indre all day beneath a dripping melon sun, the naked land of summer everywhere. And time was sunlight dancing on the river, and day was full of flowers, cream of life. I blossomed too when you walked by the path where I was sitting, reading news from home. You were a waterfall of young blonde hair, and all my thoughts were ripe. I stood up, dazed. And when you asked if I would walk that day, and if I ever stopped to take some tea, I shook my head and said I had to work. But I was taken to the chateau once, and you were there as well. We ate rook pie and a dessert of honey made from dates. And in the cellar, when we made le tour, Monsieur took our attention to the past. Long days of thunder, lightning, bitter rain that ruined this or that. My French was weak. And then rehearsed the bullet wipe of words his wife had fired a dozen years before. Mushrooms were growing thickly on old corks, and he went off with candle to find port. And I could hear your heart now beating hard, and in that darkness, underneath the earth, I could not answer, but I found your hand.
That's a wonderful poem to end up our conversation with. You've mentioned this village in the Loire Valley in France, and the
Yes.
chateau is 1,000 years old,
Yeah,
apparently.
yeah, that's right. Oh, you've done your research, yeah.
I do. Who is the narrator of the poem, and what is the significance of the year 1864?
Okay, there's no particular significance to 1864. It might have been 1872 for all I know. It's just a young man going over to France, probably to improve his French, to do something, to do some kind of work. And he goes to this tiny, extraordinarily beautiful village, but where there's nothing really to do there. It's when I was there visiting some years ago, I immediately wanted to move there.
Hmm.
And I thought, what would I do? There's just nothing to do apart from sit there and maybe read French books and walk up and down the one street. That's about it. But it is so beguiling a place that it's stuck in my memory, and I used it as the place for this. The young man is there, and he's shy, and there's a girl there, French or English, and she makes an advance to him,
Hmm.
the manner of the 19th century.
Hmm.
And that's what interested me, that he's too shy to do anything. And she obviously is breaking all kinds of protocols and trying to reach out to him.
Hmm. Um, yeah, it's interesting that you use the words lightning and thunder in the poem because he was almost struck by lightning when he saw her.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Um, desire can sometimes build and build, but it can strike suddenly out of nowhere. You were a waterfall of young blonde hair, and all my thoughts were ripe.
right.
Do you regard desire as a wild, unpredictable, untamed beast?
Comes completely out of the blue and possesses you entirely for a time. And there's nothing you can do about it. And even if you could do something about it, you wouldn't. Um, and I think in that image, I mean, he's in an extremely sensual part of France. The dripping melon sun, the naked land of summer everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, the Impressionists didn't have to do anything with the French landscape. They just had to set up an easel and just depict what was before them. It's so gorgeous. And then something even better and more sensual occurs. This girl who just walks by, and she's so stunning. Whether she's really very beautiful or not doesn't matter. It's the impact she makes on him, which is important. But he's so struck that he doesn't have words. He can't talk with her. But she has the imagination and the fortitude to talk with him and to persist. And that's what interested me, that she will go
Mm.
beyond the bounds of protocols and decorum to make something of the relationship.
The poem alludes to the push and pull of
Yeah,
desire.
yeah,
Initially, desire is refuted, you know. I shook my head and said I had to work.
right.
Now, you said he's shy, but was that denial or fear of desire or some kind of ethical or moral position? Maybe because, you know, whatever was being proposed was taboo.
Yeah, maybe some of that. Also, we do just do blankly stupid things.
Yes.
You say something, think, what did I just say? That was a stupid thing to say. It's the exact opposite of what I wanted to say. So, it becomes tongue-tied and can't say the right thing.
Mm.
Then, of course, is the story about a marriage going wrong with his host. And that should be a chastening thing, but it isn't. And he, in
No.
the end, takes some initiative. He hears her heart beating very hard down in the wine cellar, and that he reaches out in the darkness and touches her hand.
Um, by the end of the poem, as you say, you know, desire has returned and will not be thwarted.
Right.
Is that a comment on our human frailty, on our susceptibility to desire, even perhaps when it isn't a good idea?
Um, you know, resisting a desire is a very difficult thing, um, especially if you have the faintest intuition that it is the right thing. Um, you sometimes know when it's definitely the wrong thing, and still you succumb. When you're young, in particular, you're on a merry-go-round. But later on, you learn a little bit of restraint, perhaps. But even then, you have to know when to act and when not to act. The poem Gillyflower is about missing the moment of acting, and this one is about getting the moment more or less right eventually.
Essentially. Um, we talked about both the power and inadequacy of words. In this poem, I could not answer, but I found your hand.
Yes,
It is it is touch that speaks, not words.
that's right. That's right.
The lexicon of desire is so much more than words, isn't it?
It's true. I mean, he hears her heart beating in the darkness, and then he touches her. So there's a theoretical sense, hearing, but he responds with what we call a non-theoretical sense, touch. You know, it's it's seeing and hearing that gives us knowledge, primary knowledge, but touch is very, very important, particularly in relationships. And it's at the end, he still can't bring himself to say anything sensible, but he
Mm,
knows that he can just reach out and touch her hand, and that will communicate all that's needed.
mm. So, I mean, to me, the suggestion in that is that it's a forbidden desire, but maybe it's just not. It's just a shyness, and
And
we
it's
don't know.
also 19th century, a thick cloth of convention over people, even young people. And here they break away from it just slightly.
Mm. And the wonderful thing is that you leave the reader with that, and the reader has to imagine whatever follows.
Exactly, yes. We don't know what's going to occur thereafter.
Great. Um, well, I succumbed to my desire to have you on Poets Corner, Kevin. I'm very glad I did.
I'm delighted to have been on Poets Corner.
Thanks so much for sharing your poems and exploring your experiences and thoughts and insights on the theme of desire. It's been a great pleasure. A link to Kevin's author page at Amazon.com, which contains details of many of his books and where to get them, will be posted with this podcast, so please look out for that. Next up on Poets Corner will be Judith Beveridge on how poetry summons us into the sacred.